This is the Rad Wagon 4, and it's a great first bike if you're looking to dip your toe into the waters of cargo biking. It's very useful, it's easy to ride, and you can get all sorts of accessories to carry all kinds of things. Let us know what you think about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more like this. Hit the bell icon and we'll notify you when we make new videos. Right, let's dive in. Now this is the 4th generation of the Rad Wagon, and it's a significant update. The bike has been redesigned around smaller wheel set, which makes the whole bike a lot more compact and brings the centre of gravity of the load area just down a little bit to help with stability. These are 22-inch wheels, which are pretty uncommon. We can't think of another bike currently using them. Now they're running on 3-inch tyres, custom made for Rad Power by V-Tyre. The chances are that these are the only 22-inch tyres you will easily find. The good news is they're really nice. They're big moto-style tyres that offer plenty of grip and cushion. Now, you might be looking at the Rad Wagon 4 and thinking, that looks a bit like a Turn GSD. And to be honest, we had those exact same thoughts too. I mean, it's the same basic shape, it's designed to have the same kind of versatility. There's an integrated rear rack at the back that can take 2 child seats or seat pads for 2 bigger kids, and you can fit a retaining bar around it to stop them falling off. If it's stuff you're shipping around rather than people, then Rad Power make big cargo bags that can swallow up to 70 litres of shopping, and you can also fit a front basket up here as well to carry a case of beer. Loading up the bike is easy enough thanks to this slightly agricultural double kickstand down here. It works fine, but it's crying out for some rubber feet, and it'll scratch the hell out of your patio if you let it. Like the GSD, you get a double telescopic seat post at the back and a stem here that's adjustable with no tools, so it's pretty straightforward to quickly swap between 2 riders of different sizes. Pretty much anyone will fit on this bike, even though there's only one frame size available. The motor system in the Rad Wagon is pretty good for the money. After all, this is not an expensive bike. You get a 672 watt-hour frame-mounted battery, which is more than on most bikes of this kind of price. That powers a rear hub at the back there, and there's an LCD display and remote on the bars to control the system. Rad Power claim the motor kicks out 80 Newton meters. Now, that's more or less the output of one of Bosch's top-tier mid-drive systems, and the Rad Power system is objectively not as effective as something like a performance line motor, especially on the climbs. You can probably tell just by looking at it that this is a heavy bike. It weighs 35 kilos, and as soon as the gradient starts to ramp up, you'll begin to notice that. I mean, on lesser gradients, that just means going more slowly rather than having to work harder. Once the gradient approaches double figures, you'll be doing a decent proportion of the work yourself, even unloaded. One of the benefits of a mid-motor is that you can use the gears to keep the motor at its optimal speed, but hub motors have to turn at the speed that you're going, and they tend to be less effective the slower that is. Getting this bike up some of the hills around here requires some effort, and if you add 30 kilos of shopping or a couple of kids on the bench seat, then you might start to struggle. The rear cassette on this bike has a good range, although it's a big old jump to the smallest gear, and once you're down there, it'll need to flatten out considerably before you'll want to make the jump back up to the bigger gears. Now, it's worth saying at this point that that might not be an issue for you. I mean, the heaviest thing you might normally carry might be the weekly shop, and the biggest hill you might have to navigate is a bridge over the railway. You know, horses for courses. But it's worth noting that unlike the more expensive and more powerful cargo bikes, the Rad Wagon isn't ideal for all situations. It's not bad, not at all. But you know, I could give my son, who weighs 60 kilos, a lift back from school up the hill on something like the Turn GSD or the Benno Boost without a second thought. On something like the Rad Wagon, you'll need to commit to a significant effort for something like that. Once you've reached the top and you're hurtling down the other side, you'll be relying on these cable disc brakes to slow you down. And they're less powerful than the hydraulic brakes you'll find on more expensive bikes, but that was never really a big issue. The small wheels mean that the brake discs have a larger effective diameter compared to full-size bike wheels. The overall ride experience of the bike is good. It's pretty comfortable considering how heavy and stiff the frame is, and that's thanks mostly to the tyres, which take a lot of sting out of humps and bumps along the way. The gears can be a bit agricultural sometimes, especially when you're dropping down to that lowest gear, but Shimano derailleur gears are incredibly dependable, even this far down the range. The riding position is good for comfortable town riding, and the big saddle, it's fairly comfy for the sort of distances you're likely to be covering. The range is very good, and that's helped by that generous battery capacity. I was getting about 35 to 40 kilometres of hilly riding out of the Rad Wagon. Now, That's a long way below Rad Power's stated range of 88 kilometers or more, but it's a bit all or nothing around here, so there's very little cruising or mid-power settings on my commute, and no bike ever makes it to the manufacturer's stated range. Now, if you live somewhere flatter, you can expect to get a lot nearer that claim range without too much trouble. This control system isn't badly affected by the motor load, so if you're slogging up a big hill, the battery bars won't drop down to worrying levels before magically reappearing again on the flat a bit later. Sometimes it loses a single bar if you're working hard, so it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than a lot of other cheaper systems. Okay, let's talk about value. This is, by any reasonable reckoning, a very cheap cargo bike. Really, there's nothing comparable at this kind of price. Now, you can't expect miracles for not much over 1,500 quid, but you're certainly getting a lot of bike for your money. That's true in a purely physical sense on the one hand. I mean, there's a lot of metal here, but on the other hand, it's also a good bike for the money. Now, there's some cheap equipment on it, sure, and day-to-day use with heavy loads is going to take its toll on things like the cheap transmission. But overall, it's well considered, and given the constraints of the price point, I'd say that Rad Power have done a really good job with the spec. Now, really, it's impossible not to compare this bike with the Turn GSD, which is the most practical bike I've ever used, and the Rad Wagon 4 is objectively not as good in many ways, but it's a third of the price. And it might be that it's all the cargo bike you need. That's going to depend on what you use it for and to an extent where you live. If you want to get a bike that can cart kids and shopping around and you live somewhere that's not too challenging in terms of terrain and your budget doesn't stretch to a more expensive mid-motor cargo bike, then this Rad Wagon is easy to recommend. Think of it as a gateway drug. Maybe you'll never go further. Maybe you'll end up moving house by bike in 5 years' time. Who knows? Either way, this is a good start. So that's the Rad Power Rad Wagon 4. It's a really good budget e-cargo bike. Could you see yourself getting one of these for your daily trips? Let us know in the comments, and if you have any questions, stick them down there too. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Cheers.